"What is the single most important thing to remember about cats?" asked Amelia at last. The little mice waved their tails in the air. "Whiskers, whiskers, whiskers!" they all squeaked, except Piccolini, who was fast asleep. "That's right, well done. And what's the one rule you must never forget?" "Don't touch, stay clear, and never pull a cat's whiskers." This time they yelled so loudly that Piccolini was jolted wide awake. What?" she squeaked, but nobody noticed. At last the lesson was over. Mila jumped down from the biscuit packet she'd been standing on and helped Meza to tip it over onto its side. And with a nip of their razor mice teeth, they had the shiny wrapper off, and the famous scrunchy, crunchy, sticky, licky chocolate biscuits slid out onto the floor. This was the bit all the little mice had been waiting for. What a feast! What crumbs and deliciousness! Their little tails wiggled in delight as they munched, and they gnawed, and they gobbled until every last biscuit had gone. And all this barely 3 tail lengths from fearless Fitzroy Mouser's sleeping nose. Meza and Mila were now very full and rather sleepy themselves. Not so the little mice. They were bursting with chocolate energy. Said Meza as she cleaned her whiskers. "Now run along and play." And she settled down for a lazy chat with her sister. The mouse children set off to explore the biggest, best and furriest adventure playground ever, Fitzroy. They swarmed up his sleeping back. They tobogganed down his sleeping sides. They swung from his sleeping ears. They used his tail as a skipping rope and played hide and seek under his sleeping paws. They were just dancing the conga in a great long line up his back and over his head, each little mouse holding the tail of the one in front and kicking their little legs out in a stomping rhythm, when the door of the warehouse flew open with a clang, and there stood the boss, Mr. Fame himself. This time he had someone with him. A heavy man in big gloves, wearing baggy overalls, with the words "Cat Killers Incorporated" printed on the back. In one hand he had a big stick, and in the other a large black sack. "Just get rid of him," Mr. Fame was bellowing. "I don't care how. It's time for mouse traps." For a split second everyone froze. Oh no, not Fitzroy, not mouse traps, not that! And then, in the blink of an eye and the twitch of a tail, both mother mice and all 23 mouselets simply vanished. Only tiny Piccolini was left, frozen to the spot on top of fearless Fitzroy's snoozing head, with a look of horror on her face. Suddenly she lost her balance. She teetered, she tottered, and with a piercing shriek right into Fitzroy's ear, she toppled straight over his eye and fell into space, paws flailing. And then she did something terrible, something every mouse knows she should never do. But then she had missed that bit of the lesson. She broke the one rule of cat safety that no mouse should ever forget. She grabbed hold of a whisker and hung there, suspended in mid-air, eyes on stalks, mouth open wide. Piccolini's shriek tore into Fitzroy's dream with a deafening force. An instant later, a terrible stab of pain from the tip of his nose to the end of his tail hurtled him awake. His head swung back and his eyes snapped open. Oh no! Oh yes! Fearless Fitzroy found himself face to face with his very worst nightmare. Every cat's greatest fear, the deadly dangling mouse monster itself. It was big. It was ugly. It had eyes on stalks and huge sharp biting teeth, and oh how it hurt. Fitzroy leapt into the air. He roared and he clawed, he snarled and he howled, he lashed and he smashed and he spun and he ran like the greatest mouse-mangling hunter in the world. Oh, how he fought! Unlike little Piccolini, who was so small nobody really noticed her. Lost her grip on the whisker she was clinging to as she dangled right there, wham! In front of Fitzroy's eyes, and was hurled across the room, across the warehouse, like a piece of thistledown. Frantic Fitzroy was so busy springing up in the air and landing, bang, on all 4 feet, snarling and scratching and fighting. For a split second he didn't realise what had happened. Then it dawned on him. It was over. Deadly dangling mouse monster had gone. He'd shaken it off. It had won. With a howl of relief, Fitzroy came to a stop, chest heaving in front of a pair of heavy studded boots, an evil-smelling sack, and blood-stained club. You sure you want to get rid of him, boss? Said a voice. He looks like a champion mouser to me, but still, if you say so. And the heavy club swung slowly into the air. From somewhere above Fitzroy's head there came a strange sound, like the sound of a balloon losing air. Psst. It was Mr. Fame. He didn't like being made to look silly. Certainly not by a cat. Even less by a cat disposal man. He gawped like a goldfish. Puffed like a kettle. Stop! He exploded at last. Get rid of him? Of course not. Whatever gave you that idea? Mousetraps? Ridiculous. You must be a fool. As for parting with this fine beast, waving at Fitzroy, I wouldn't dream of it. Essential. Senior management. And on he went, getting more and more indignant. At this point, Fitzroy lost interest. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see something small moving. Something very small. Fitzroy stared. There, dancing along the skirting board, tripping over her big baby feet and grinning at him, was the tiniest mouse he'd ever seen. A mouse who looked strangely familiar, like a miniature version of... Surely not. Oh yes, the deadly dangling mouse monster. Slowly Fitzroy began to blush. From the tip of his tail to the top of his nose he blushed. Not that anyone could tell with all that fur. Well, except possibly Piccolini, but she was looking straight at him with one paw to her lips and the other pointing up over his head where Mr. Fane was dancing with rage. And as Mr. Fame, still shouting, pushed the cat disposal man out of the warehouse and slammed the door, Fitzroy sank to the ground with a sigh of relief. If you'd been listening carefully, you would have heard an answering whispery sigh of relief echo all round the warehouse and out of every mouse hole. But the only mouse you'd have noticed would have been Piccolini, as she blew Fitzroy a kiss and winked. As for Mr. Fame, he never set foot in the warehouse again, and although he sent parcels of pilchards and salmon to Fitzroy addressed to Senior Mouse Manager, soon afterwards Famous Chocolate Biscuits introduced a new trademark. It was the print of a mouse's footprint in chocolate. Want the best? Look for the paw print, said the label. Fearless Fitzroy, who was now not afraid of anything at all, slept better than ever before. And Piccolini? Well, she never grew very big, but overnight she became without a doubt the most famous mouse for miles around. And from that time on, she spent her days in the biscuit warehouse watching over her big friend as he snoozed. And she made very sure that all the little mice who came to do their cat practice never ruffled one single whisker. The end. Well, that was a great book, wasn't it? And fearless Fitzroy, what a big scaredy cat he was, and so lazy. But imagine being that scared of a tiny, tiny little mouse like Piccolini. And I can't believe how he managed to fool that big nasty boss. But good job he did, because he would have been... Anyway, we hope you enjoyed that story as much as we did. Okay, and we will see you again next week for another story. Have a good week. Have lots of fun and be safe. Bye-bye from me. Bye-bye from Rusty.